praise for God's wonderful works. Praise the Lord. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart in the company of the upright in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of honor and majesty is his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He has gained renown by his wonderful deeds. The Lord is gracious and merciful. He provides food for those who fear him. He is even mindful of his covenant. He has shown his people the power of his works in giving them the heritage of the nations. The works of his hands are faithful and just. All his precepts are trustworthy. They are established forever and ever, to be performed with faithfulness and uprightness. He sent redemption to his people. He has commanded his covenant forever. Holy and awesome is his name. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. His praise endures forever. Here ends the reading from the book of Psalms. May God bless our hearing and living of these words. Amen.
Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. God is still speaking.
Thanks be to God.
Let us listen for the word of God as it is found in the first book of Kings, chapter 2, verses 10 through 12, and chapter 3, verses 3 through 14. I will be reading from the Common English Bible, which is slightly different from the New Revised Standard versions that are found in the pews. Then David lay down with his ancestors and was buried in David's city. He ruled over Israel 40 years, 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his royal power was well established. Now Solomon loved the Lord by walking in the laws of his father David, with the exception that he also sacrificed and burned incense at the shrines. The king went to the great shrine at Gibeon in order to sacrifice there. He used to offer 1,000 entirely burned offerings on that altar. The Lord appeared to Solomon at Gibeon in a dream at night. God said, "Ask whatever you wish, and I will give it to you." Solomon responded, "You showed so much kindness to your servant, my father, David, when he walked before you in truth, righteousness, and with a heart true to you. You've kept this great loyalty and kindness for him, and have now given him a son to sit on his throne. And now, Lord my God, you have made me, your servant, king in my father David's place. But I'm young and inexperienced. I know next to nothing. But I am here, your servant, in the middle of the people you have chosen, a large population that can't be numbered or counted due to its vast size. Please give your servant a discerning mind in order to govern your people and to distinguish good from evil, because no one is able to govern this important people of yours without your help." It pleased the Lord that Solomon had made this request. God said to him, "Because you have asked for this, instead of requesting long life, wealth, or victory over your enemies, asking for discernment so as to acquire good judgment, I will now do just what you said. Look, I hereby give you a wise and understanding mind. There has been no one like you before now, nor will there be anyone like you afterward. I now also give you what you didn't ask for, wealth and fame. There won't be a king like you as long as you live, and if you walk in my ways and obey my laws and commands, just as your father David did, then I will give you a very long life. Here ends the reading from Holy Scripture. May God bless our hearing and living of these words. God blessed it. Woo! This week it was a struggle writing a message to share with you all today, because when you set about to write something wise about wisdom, well, the outcome usually is that you can't think of anything at all to say. And so I turned to one of my favorite sources, that is screenwriter Aaron Sorkin, and was trying to find any wisdom that he might have. And Aaron Sorkin said, "Good writers borrow from other writers, and great writers steal from them outright." So with that, to begin, I would like to steal a story from Debbie Thomas. She's a theologian and a writer that I'd like to share with us this morning. The story is called A King's Tale. Debbie Thomas writes, "Once upon a time, there was a wise prince. Following his father's death, the prince assumed his divinely appointed throne, married a beautiful princess from a neighboring kingdom, and settled down to govern his people to the glory of God. Soon afterwards, God appeared to him in a dream and promised to grant the young royal whatever his heart desired. Being a humble man, the king refused to ask for wealth, power, or long life, and instead replied thus, 'I am only a child. Therefore, give me an understanding mind to govern your people and to discern between good and evil.' God was so pleased with the king's request, he promised not only to grant it, to make this king the wisest human being in history, but to grant him every other measure of greatness as well: untold wealth, matchless honor, and long life. In time, the king's reputation for brilliance spread across the land. Nobles traveled from distant shores to hear his pithy sayings and witness his wise judgments. In accordance with his wisdom and God's blessing, the king's wealth and power grew beyond measure. He made strategic, political, and economic alliances, maintained fleets of ships, built gorgeous temples and palaces, traded in luxuries such as gold, silver, and ivory. He penned the greatest wisdom literature of his time, presided over the golden age of his kingdom, and finally handed over the throne to his son after a peaceable reign of 40 years. By any measure, a happily ever after story. Once upon a time, there was a shrewd prince. Following the death of the king, the prince ordered the murder of his older brother, the rightful heir, and assumed his father's throne with blood on his hands. He spent the earliest days of his reign carrying out the vengeance killings his father had requested before his death. Then, believing himself to have divine wisdom and a divine mandate, he set out to build the kingdom of his dreams, a kingdom of wealth, prestige, and power. The king's appetites were beyond excessive. To support his extravagant lifestyle, he levied taxes his subjects could not bear, To control knowledge, he gathered the surrounding world's wisdom traditions to himself. To complete his lavish building projects, he conscripted thousands of people into forced labor. To satisfy his desires, he assembled a harem of 700 wives and 300 concubines. To quell his spiritual restlessness, he constructed pagan shrines and offered worship to gods who demanded child sacrifice. The results of his choices were dire. By the end of his reign, his people could no longer bear the crushing burdens of taxation and slavery he had placed upon them. In the wake of his paganism, they could no longer differentiate between idolatry and worship. Because he had monopolized God to justify his personal brand of wisdom, his subjects had nowhere to turn for divine discernment or reparation. Soon the king found himself confronted by enemies. Though he attempted to fight back, God's hand was against him, and he enjoyed little success. He died shortly thereafter, denied the long life he had dreamed of. His son then tried to force the disgruntled masses back into servitude, but they resisted, and a civil war that would last for decades broke out across the land. The kingdom split into two, and the famed king's once golden dream dissolved into chaos. By any measure, not a happily ever after story. So, which story is true? Who is King Solomon? Is he a sage or a fool? A noble or a glutton? A leader or a tyrant? That's the first question that's posed by this week's lectionary reading from 1 Kings. But here's the second question. What happens if the answer is simply yes? What if King Solomon was all of the above? What then? Debbie Thomas presents us with a good, fair, hard question. What if King Solomon is all of the above? At St. Paul's United Church of Christ, we follow the Revised Common Lectionary. The Revised Common Lectionary is a 3-year cycle of weekly lections or readings from the Bible, used to varying degrees by the vast majority of mainline Protestant churches in Canada and the United States. It was compiled, it was all put together by the Consultation on Common Texts. This is a group of about 19 different denominations all throughout North America, from the Anglican Church in Canada to the Unitarian Universalist Christian Fellowship, from the Polish National Catholic Church to our very own United Church of Christ. In the middle of the 1960s, a lot of churches and denominations were undergoing a renewal of worship. In fact, you could date the founding of the United Church of Christ in 1957 to that same spirit of renewal and harmony that was just sweeping through Christianity in the middle part of the 20th century. So this group, with all of these representatives from all of these different churches, they created this lectionary. That's how we know what we read every Sunday. This list of readings that matches up with the calendar. And the group, it still exists. They continue to revise the lectionary, they write prayers, they create worship materials. And I like the lectionary. You know, one of the things that it's really good at, we could maybe call it the wisdom of the lectionary, is that it makes you focus on parts of the Bible that you otherwise might overlook. Without a lectionary, it's really easy to just preach on or focus on your favorite parts, your favorite stories or themes. But the lectionary isn't perfect. It's far from perfect, because the lectionary, it doesn't cover the whole Bible, and sometimes, like this morning, the things that it leaves out are just too important. Like the second part of A King's Tale, of that story, the part that shows the cruelty and ruthlessness and greed of Solomon. We didn't get to read that in our lectionary today. In fact, we won't read that throughout all 3 years of the lectionary. So if your only contact with the Bible is once a week in church, listening to the lector or to the preacher, then we, the church, have failed you. Because we will have heard all of the good and wise things about King Solomon, and only the good and wise things about King Solomon. Local church pastor and professor of religion John Holbert writes, quote, "When we attempt to cover over our actions and words with pious and fawning claptrap, we imagine that no one will see us completely for what we sometimes are." And the lectionary collectors this week have done precisely that. They want us to proclaim to our people that David and Solomon were paragons of piety and love for God. They were not. They were all too human, filled with bloody ambition for power, lust for fame and fortune, reeking with the desire for revenge on enemies, real and perceived. These Bible tales will not let us avert our eyes from the realities of who we sometimes are. The Bible rarely, if ever, says, "Be like this or that character." Rather, it says, "You are like this or that character. Now what will you do about it?" If you take anything from this sermon, this decidedly unwise sermon, but trying really hard to be, if you take anything from this sermon, take that. The Bible doesn't say, "Be like this." It says, "You are like this, the good and the bad. What will you do about it?" So it turns out that when we focus on wisdom, we inadvertently focus on failure. Solomon's failure, the Revised Common Lectionary's failure, my own failure to deliver pithy wisdom. But failure, if it's acknowledged, if we listen to it, if we open our hearts to its fruits, failure is a wonderful vehicle for humility. We don't have to pretend that Solomon was a perfect ruler or a perfect person. God knows of Solomon's failings. God knows of our own. God does not ask us to be perfect, but God does expect us to be humble, to listen, to learn from our mistakes and from others' experiences, to distinguish good from evil, acknowledging that we don't always know and we should continually seek God's help. And maybe that in itself is wisdom. The wisdom to know that even with knowledge, even with skills and resources, God is God and we are not. Debbie Thomas's story ends this way. Once upon a time, there was a king. He had big dreams, as most of us do. He had great faults, as most of us do. He lived a life marked by success and failure, nobility and disgrace. He loved God, and he didn't. He pleased God, and he didn't. He left a legacy that was neither perfect nor wretched, as most of us will. But he was loved by God throughout, even when his foolish wisdom shattered God's heart. As are we. As are we. Amen.